Hello, everyone. You're listening to the Art of Reinvention podcast show. This show focuses on helping you become the best version of yourself by producing thought-provoking and life-changing content. Here's your host, Teflon John.
Hey everyone, it's Teflon John. We're back again with Chief Ryan Zuidema. He's the police chief of the Lynchburg Police Department, and I'm pretty sure you all have seen parts 1 and part 2 by now. So now we're just going to get into a more detailed conversation. So just like leaving off from where we were talking about, could you kind of dive into the use of force and I guess when you should use deadly force if you have to?
Yeah, so use of force is a very complicated subject. It's something that sometimes oversimplified by either media outlets or television or the movies and things like that. But it's much more complicated. And there's a lot of legal guidance that we're given from the Supreme Court. There's a landmark case, Graham versus Connor, that looks at kind of 3 prongs of why officers can and when they should use force. When you look at those, first and foremost, it's the severity of the crime. What is the officer investigating or dealing with, attempting to arrest someone for? The second prong is, is that is that individual that's the officer's dealing with pose an immediate threat to the officer or to a member of the public? And then lastly, the third prong is, is that person actively resisting that arrest or attempting to flee? So, the officer, anytime they use force, they have to take all that into account. And, we ask them in some cases to take that into account in split seconds, right? A lot of times they're showing up, they've got limited information of what's going on at the situation. They're posed with some type of threat pretty quickly, and they've got to factor all those things in and make some type of judgment on what type of force they use, from grabbing a hold of somebody physically and trying to take them into custody to maybe using pepper spray or a taser or a baton or God forbid a firearm. So deadly force is something that's a last resort for any officer to use. It's something that no officer ever wants to use in their career, and the overwhelming majority of officers go through their entire careers and never have to fire their weapon. And so anytime that force is used, it's something officers take seriously. They take those factors into account, and they try and make sure that we're using the minimal amount of force necessary to accomplish, whether it's the arrest or whatever the law enforcement action is that they're trying to use. And we train our officers annually on use of force to make sure they're up to speed on that. We are very, very committed to de-escalation in our department, have been for many years. We had a situation probably a month or 2 back now over at Hillside Court here in the city apartment complex. A gentleman there had shot, let me take a step back. He was involved in an altercation with a female, and there was a child involved. She called us. We were able to get her out, and then shortly after getting her out, he was still in the apartment and was firing his gun off multiple times in a variety of directions. And that's a situation where obviously the officer's safety is in danger, but as importantly, or more importantly, the citizens, many who can't defend themselves, they're in danger too. So that situation, we spent probably 4 hours or more over there trying to de-escalate that situation through our crisis negotiation team. They were on site, and we brought in other resources to try and talk this gentleman out. And eventually, through the use of some less lethal options with putting some gas into the apartment that he was in, he eventually put the gun down and came out peacefully and was taken into custody without incident. And that's a win for everybody, right? No force was used on that individual. He was taken into custody to be held accountable for his actions. So they're complex situations, and it's something that we spend a lot of time training our folks on to make sure they've got the most up-to-date training and understanding of what the legal parameters are related to that.
Okay, now I remember you saying something that like the public or like they can go through some type of simulation training that will kind of replicate that?
Yeah, so we encourage the public. We offer a Citizens Police Academy regularly. Obviously, it's on hold right now because of COVID, like everything else is. But once that's back open and safe for us to do, we'll offer those classes again. It's a multi-week class where they come one night a week for several weeks. And one of the things we do is we put them in use of force scenarios. So we give them a duty belt with the majority of the equipment that we have on it, and we dress somebody up, one of our officers is a role player, in some type of a suit so they can actually, believe it or not, use a baton and strike them right, and they can do other things. And then we also have what's called a firearms training simulator, or a FATS machine for short, and it's a video machine, or a video monitor rather, that's tied into some technology that allows the weapons that we have on our belt to interact with that screen. So it could be a situation where you're in a school, that's the video you're looking at, and there's someone that comes out with a gun, you have to address that. Or it might be a situation where you're out in the open somewhere, a park or something like that, and somebody quickly turns and pulls out and they've got a wallet in their hand, right? And
Gotcha.
so, you've got to make some split-second decisions, and you, if you use deadly force and use your firearm, it'll show on the screen where your rounds are hitting as you fire them, and it's about as realistic a training as you can get, right, without actually being in a real scenario. And we've had a lot of citizens that have gone through that and residents that have gone through that over the years, and I think it's an eye-opening experience. So we certainly encourage, those that are watching, we'd love to have you as a part of our academy coming up once we reopen them, because it gives you a real in-depth, not just the use of force, but all the other things that our officers do, why they do it. They get demonstrations of different units that are involved, and kind of an explanation of what we provide as services as a police department here in Lynchburg.
Okay. Now, with other demonstrations, I've heard of ride-alongs, but I don't really know like the details. But if someone wants to do a ride-along, like what would they experience during that?
Yeah, so those are also on hold, unfortunately, because of COVID right now, but we'll certainly get those back up and run as quick as we can when it's safe to do that. But so a ride-along, there's an online application. You go to our website, the application's there, you submit it. We just do a quick background check to make sure you're not, wanted out of, Montana for some horrible crime. And then we get you in a car, and you'll ride for multiple hours with an officer, and you'll go wherever that officer goes. You'll see what that officer sees. And, we had a former police chief here who actually hired me when I was a young officer, Chuck Bennett, who regularly said that Lynchburg looks a lot different through the windshield of a police car, right? And there's things that you'll see and people you'll interact with that you might not otherwise interact with. And I think it gives folks a real good some real good insight into what our officers deal with each and every day, and some of the challenges that they face. Because the reality is a lot of the things that we're called to as law enforcement officers are not related to police matters or law enforcement issues, right? We're kind of the catch-all. If you don't know who else to call, sometimes you call 911 and ask for the police, right? And we do our best, obviously, to help folks and to serve as a conduit to direct them or guide them to the right resources. But at 3 o'clock in the morning, we're kind of the only show in town, right? And we'll go there and try and alleviate whatever the issue is or concern is. But it's a great opportunity. I know a lot of people who've done the ride-alongs who after that get done with that, and they think, wow, this is something everybody should try and take advantage of. And most law enforcement agencies offer that type of program.
Gotcha. Now, do you have anyone that you've seen, like they did a ride-along and they end up taking the whole journey and becoming a policeman?
Yeah, a lot of them actually. It's that's how I started my career.
Oh, wow.
So I not here in Lynchburg, but I did a ride along back where I'm from in New York. I think we talked about that originally, and I was like, wow, this is something I could see myself doing. So for me, that's kind of what really sparked my interest. And we've got multiple officers here that kind of were not sure if they maybe did want to do it or didn't want to do it, and they took a ride along, and they convinced them to kind of take that next step.
Gotcha. So what's the process someone would have to go through that may be interested? They may watch this and feel motivated, or they may be seeing what's going on and they may want to make a difference. So how do they go and become a policeman?
Yeah, so the first place I'd direct them to at least get some initial information is our website again. They can get some basic information on what the hiring process looks like, what some of the disqualifiers may be, depending on background and history and things like that. But, the process is initially to fill out the application, right? And then we bring them in shortly. We'll do a quick screen of that just, again, to make, there's certain things, you can't, if you're a felon, you can't be a police officer because you have to be able to carry a gun, and, felons are not allowed in Virginia to carry guns. And there's a couple other things. They'll check real quick to make sure there aren't any disqualifiers. If there aren't, we bring folks in to do what we call a Super Saturday. So what we found is instead of extending our hiring process that used to take up to 6 months to get hired, a lot of people don't have 6 months to wait around and see if they're going to get a job, right? That's reality. So we've tried to condense that down. We do a Super Saturday, and at that Super Saturday, we do a written test, we do a physical fitness test, and then we do an oral review board where they're asked some questions that are basically looking to kind of gauge that candidate to see if their heart and their mind are kind of in the right place. So we ask some integrity-related questions, right? And they go through that. If they pass all of those steps on that Super Saturday, then we push them along. There's other steps that include a polygraph or a lie detector test, a full background test or examination rather. The background, I say that if you had applied with us, by the time we got done with your background, we'd know more about you than your mama does, right?
Wow.
We'll talk to your family, we'll talk to your workers or your coworkers rather. We'll talk to your employer. We'll go and knock on doors of your neighbors, even if you don't list them as references. Just say, hey, is John a decent guy, and is this somebody you could see being a police officer, right? And if we get done with all that, we'll then give them a conditional offer of employment. That is conditional upon them passing a medical examination as well as a psychological examination. We send all of our folks up to UVA for a full psychological examination that lasts several hours in many cases, because as the chief of police, I got to feel comfortable that the individual that I'm placing out on the street at 2 o'clock in the morning by themselves with a badge and a gun is mentally stable, quite honestly. And so we make sure we check that as well. And then if all that goes well, then we'll give you a full letter of employment and bring you on. Then we send you through about 6 months of the police academy. We get you out of that. We do about another month of post-academy training here at the police department. And then we put you with a field training officer. You'll ride with another officer who'll be kind of one to teach you and mentor you for about another 3 months. So all said, it's close to a year of training before you're ever even on your own. So, and then we continually train throughout the career and continually do mental health checks as well throughout the career to make sure that our folks see a lot of challenging things out there, and things that, quite honestly, other human beings shouldn't have to see. But we want to make sure that they're fit to continue working. And so it's we take, as you can tell, a very thorough process. But again, I've got to feel comfortable knowing that the men and women I put out on the street are ones that are going to serve our community well and represent our organization professionally.
Gotcha. Now, is there any program for, let's say I'm a police officer and, like you said, I'm witnessing traumatic events, like where I can get help, talk to someone?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's certain situations where our policy mandates, if you're involved in certain critical incidents, that we will mandate you go to sit down and speak with someone in the mental health field. But we also have a peer support program here that we are working on a lot of different wellness issues with, from physical wellness to emotional wellness, psychological wellness, financial wellness, right? All those things. And we also have a chaplain program here. And our chaplains are all volunteers. We have 3 of them right now that are kind of on call pretty much 24/7. And those are folks that our officers and our staff can reach out to if they have challenges, and confidentially. So if you were one of my officers and you had a challenge, you want to talk to a chaplain, when you talk to that chaplain doesn't come back and say, "Hey, Ryan, John came to me and he told me this." That's completely confidential. Gotcha. and to make sure. And then we also have a employee assistance program through the city that our folks can use as well. And anytime somebody comes to us and says, "Hey, I'm struggling with something, or I need some help with this," we're going to find them multiple resources to make sure we take care of them as not just a police officer, but quite honestly as an individual as well. Gotcha. So.
Okay, that sounds good, because I like that, they do have some type of mental rehabilitation, because I think sometimes when you're going through that, it can actually shape a person. Like we talked about earlier, like your perception and what you're seeing can actually shape you. So I do like how they have that type of outlet. Right. So with your career, have you ever had anything that you saw that kind of shaped you, like where you wanted to become, like, hey, I've really got to get out there and make a difference?
Yeah, I'll tell you, very early in my career, I was a patrol officer. I'd maybe been on the job for, I don't know, a year, maybe 2 at the absolute most. And there was a traffic accident that occurred just outside of the city on 501 going up towards Big Island, in kind of those sharp curves back and forth there. And there was a young man, he was maybe 16 or 17 years old, that was driving. He lost control of the vehicle going in through that area and passed away as a result of the accident. And one of the unfortunate jobs that we have as law enforcement officers is doing death notifications, right? That's not something that as a parent you'd want to hear over the phone, right? So myself and another officer at about, 1 o'clock in the morning went to a home of this young man and sat down. Obviously when the police knock on your door at 1 o'clock in the morning, like, what's wrong, right? What's up? And obviously they had expected their son home prior to that, and you could see the look in their face when you went to the door. Very difficult. The mother just collapsed to the ground. The father was just kind of no, and then there was a sister, their daughter, the victim's sister, that came in. And that early on in my career was a very different and very difficult experience for me. I knew full well getting in this job, that's something that's part of it, but to see the how challenging that was for that family, and that kind of helped me realize that what we do matters, right? Like I think sometimes people think, well, you guys just write tickets so you can write tickets and generate money. No, we write tickets to keep people like that young man safe, right? To help, him understand that how you drive is critically important to your safety, right? And so, things like that, I think, you take really personal, and you help use those things to guide you as a law enforcement officer going forward to help folks, because the reality is we interact. I think I said it earlier when we were talking. We interact with hundreds, if not thousands, of people in our career. But that one interaction that you may have with a law enforcement officer is important. So I think we need to. That helps us kind of personalize it and realize why we do what we do. And to me, it helps solidify why I'm in this profession. That sometimes we deal with people on their absolute worst day, right? And it's important in how we treat those people. We treat them with respect. We treat them with dignity. We do everything we can to try and help them out because they're in sometimes the roughest point of their life. So it's important how we interact with them.
Yeah, that's really something to think about because you really don't think about those things because the media puts out one thing and always showing you responding to crime, but no one thinks about the small things. My cousin is a firefighter, and he was just telling me small things that firefighters do that no one thinks about. So could you talk about some other small things that police officers have to do or have to deal with as part of your duty that pretty much get overshadowed in the media?
Yeah, so one story that comes to my mind, and this isn't something that we have to do, but this is something our officers do on, I would argue, to at least a weekly basis, if not a daily basis. But, we go to a lot of calls, again, where we deal with people in their worst of their worst times. And we had a situation not too long ago where a couple of our officers went to a domestic-related call, and they were dealing with a woman who was down and out, and her son was very challenging to deal with. And ultimately, what these officers did is they were dealing with this call, and they look around the house and realize, number one, there's no furniture in the house, none. And they realize there's not hardly any food in the house, right? So as a result of that, they go, once the call's done, they've handled the legal issues they need to handle, over the next couple days or weeks, I forget how long it was, they go together and put their own money together and they buy some furniture for this woman and deliver it to her house, right? And they go buy some food and deliver it, and then, another story not too long ago, we had a couple of officers that went to a call where a woman's son had died. And, so they get there and they help kind of work that through her, and she's obviously very distraught. And in that time, one of the things that she mentions to one of our officers that's there is, he was just doing fine earlier, and I don't know what I'm going to do. He's the one that mows my lawn, and she's thinking of all these things, right, that are going to impact her. And I couldn't be more proud of the fact that one of my officers that was on that scene, a couple days later, on his day off, on his own time, without me asking or anybody telling him, he drove over there with his own lawnmower and took it off his trailer and mowed this woman's lawn for her. And to your point, that's not the stuff that we often see in the media. That's not the stuff that's kind of heralded in any way, shape, or form. And quite honestly, it's not the stuff that our folks go around bragging about. Yeah. They do it because they're human beings. They do it because they see the hurt that other people have, and they take an opportunity to try and make a difference in that person's life. And they realize their role is not just arresting people and writing people tickets. Their role is as a community caretaker, and part of that means looking out for people. And those two scenarios, I think, show that greatly. And again, not something you always see every day in the media, but I'll tell you, that type of stuff goes on a pretty regular basis, whether it's that. We had another officer not long ago that saw a homeless gentleman down behind Target and took it upon himself to drive over to Chick-fil-A and buy him a lunch, bought himself a lunch, went over and sat down and ate lunch with him. I mean, again, those are the things that I think sometimes that we maybe either don't do as good a job of telling our story as a police department, or they aren't maybe passed around in the social media circles as quickly as negative information is sometimes, right?
All right, so let's take a deep dive because you guys have been doing and going around to the communities, which you really don't see that a lot as far as in other precincts that I've seen, but I like how you guys are giving people a chance to have a voice. So could you elaborate on what those sessions are and what the purpose is?
Yeah, so we're calling them listening sessions because that's exactly what we're doing when we're there as police officers. We're literally listening. We've done 3 of them so far. We've got 3 more to go. They're in variety of our Parks and Rec locations, so our community centers is where we're trying to hold them, so they're kind of centrally located to each kind of unique area in the city. And the goal of those is to really get feedback and open and honest criticism or support. We tell people at the beginning, each one of them, we've got a professional facilitator that handles those, so it's not me or another police officer up there kind of guiding and directing it. It's a woman, Gloria Witt. She's well known in the community as a professional facilitator, and she comes in and helps kind of set the plate. And we tell them up front, we want the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? If there's something that you've had an interaction with the police, how does that look? What does it look like? It's geared specifically towards any stories about any bias that they've seen from our officers, especially in the Black community, right? So, the two questions she asks is, tell a story first and foremost about your interaction with Lynchburg police officers, good, bad, or ugly, and kind of how it left you feeling, right? And we've got a ton of feedback on that, and some consistent themes out of that I'll talk about in a second. And then the second question she asks is, what going forward, what does an ideal police department look like to you? As a citizen, a resident, a visitor, whatever it may be, what does that look like to you? And again, some really great ideas, some great suggestions from folks, and some of the themes that we've taken out of there. I've told folks, and I think we talked about this before. We're kind of focused on three major buckets right now, right? Accountability, transparency, and training. And and a lot of the themes that we're getting out of the response from our residents and visitors that are coming to this is, that it's not always so much about what the police do, but how they do it, right? And how we left them feeling, right, at the end of that. It's about respect, right? It's about treating people as human beings, and taking the time to explain to folks, what it is we do, and more importantly, why we do it, right? Because I think a lot of times you and I can have an interaction. I think we discussed this earlier, right? But how you perceive that interaction and I perceive it may be very, very different, right? So I think it's an educational piece to that as well. And so again, we're about halfway through them right now. We've got some great feedback, and we hope to continue to get more. And I tell people, tell me what I, as a police chief, need to hear, not what I want to hear. Because if you just come and tell me what I want to hear, it's a waste of everybody's time, right? Tell me what I need to hear. Tell me if you need to call my baby ugly, then call my baby ugly, right? And we'll work through that and figure out, how we can take all that information. The goal is at the end to put it all together, kind of develop a plan of action going forward, and see how we can continue to improve how we police the community.
So is the turnout good? I know I've seen like a lot of females, but are there a lot of African American males coming out too?
Yeah, so I would say definitely more African American females than males, but we've definitely had a decent number of males as well. And the one we did last night, great session, and I think it was probably our most engaging one so far, with a lot of just honest feedback, right? And an opportunity for us to truly understand what those concerns are, instead of just assuming we know what the issues are, because you know what happens when we assume, right? We kind of make fools of ourselves. So we want to make sure we understand and kind of hear it from the individual's experience, and not necessarily from second or third hand information.
I think that's great, because you're taking that middleman out, where we're watching the news and getting a certain deal, and then you're kind of hearing throughout the community and hearing on social media. I think that's great that you're going directly to the source. So now there's really no barrier in between. So what are your plans for? Because I know you're very proactive. Is how you're going to take? Is it going to be like one situation, or are you kind of attacking it all, like you said?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of feedback we're getting. There's a couple things we've already heard that we've already taken steps on, right? Like early on, even prior to our listening sessions, we were meeting with individuals and different groups in the community. One of the things that came up right out of the gate was, why don't you have an online form to file complaints against officers? And we kind of looked at each other and we said, that's a really good idea. Why? I don't know why we haven't done that before, just an oversight. So, within a couple of weeks, we had our IT folks put that together. That's online now. Folks can do that. So if there's something that's quick and easy that is a no-brainer to do, we're going to do it, right? But what we also want to do is make sure we gather this information. And we're very intentional about how we approach it. Because what I don't want to do is get done with these and say, okay, here's a quick fix. Okay, we're done. We don't need to do anything anymore. This is an evolution. This is a constantly ongoing thing. And we need to make sure that we're very strategic about how we go about making any change. So we're going to kind of look at those, prioritize what we think is important, more importantly, what the community thinks is important, right? Blend that all together, and then put some action steps in place to try and accomplish those things, and that's going to require some time to take care of. It doesn't, get fixed overnight, certainly, and, it might require some additional resources, right, from the city to make sure that we've got everything we need to serve the community in the way they want to be.
Yeah, and I like that you're actually accepting the fact that it's more of a infinite game. Like there's no start and stop, like no winner tomorrow. That is going to be a continuation. Even when me and you are probably gone, it should be a continuing, strive at it. It's kind of like when you look at Martin Luther King's dream. It was him pushing for it, but he wasn't around to see it. Right. But you still see it continuing to move forward. And so I think something like this with the listening sessions, I think this is a great start to something that could be great, in the end, because now you wouldn't have to rely on like the media. You would say, hey, well, I'll just talk to the chief or whoever at the listening session. I won't go through and the hearsay and all that good stuff. So another topic we're going to talk about is the school resource officer. So, which I didn't find out till maybe a couple of days ago, that some schools are actually doing away with them or like taking them out of schools.
Right. Yeah, so that's some of the narrative going across the country is to try and remove school resource officers from the schools, and I'll tell you, I am 100% adamantly opposed to that. I think our school resource officers serve so many roles in part of that fabric of the high school community and the middle school community. In Lynchburg, we've got a school resource officer in each of our 2 high schools and each of our 3 middle schools, and they're critically important. They serve as educators. They help teach classes. They serve as mentors, right? They serve as just being a friend that a kid who's having a rough day can come and sit down and talk to, right? And they're great role models for our students there. They're overly engaged in the activities there. We have our school resource officers that are hanging out on their own time to watch sporting events, to go to plays, to watch band competitions, and everything else in between. And they're a great resource. And just as importantly is it's a safety issue. Unfortunately in America we live in a day and age where we've seen way too many school shootings, way too many. Hundreds and hundreds of school shootings over the last 10 years. And my hope and prayer is that we never have to deal with that here in Lynchburg. But should evil come knocking on the door of one of our schools, I want to make sure that we have someone there that can address that and help protect the students and the staff. And it's critical that those young learners can be there and feel comfortable doing that, and quite honestly the staff can too, right? Yeah. And so we've had school resource officers in our schools here in Lynchburg for over 20 years. My hope is that we'll continue to do that. I think it's critically important, and it also, one of the really big benefits of it is it allows our officers to develop relationships, one-on-one relationships with young men and women in a non-enforcement setting, right? If we're ever going to change the tide of relationships between law enforcement and the community, it's got to start at a young age. And it can't be done in the middle of a crisis when someone calls 911. That's not the time to build those relationships. The time is to build them in an atmosphere like a school where they can be there to help them along. Some of our officers actually coach some of the sports at the schools and have for years. So they're really a part of that fabric of the school. And so I'm adamant that we keep them in there, and I'll certainly do everything I can to make sure folks understand that.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy when you think about it. When you think about like school shootings, church shootings, it seems like shootings are becoming almost like the new norm, sadly. But you would think there's a saying like when the cat's away, the mice will play. And knowing that there's no law enforcement in the schools could create an opportunity for some of these people who choose to do these horrific things. And so I'm just not understanding, but everything that you said. I remember we had school resource officers that everybody was cool with, and it just makes you feel safe. Because I remember being in school when Columbine happened. Never heard of that happening before, but you feel safe knowing that someone's in there.
Yeah, and I think that's so important, to have that level of comfort, right? To know that there's someone there that's their sole job is to look out for them, and some of the criticism we've heard of school resource officers across the country, is that they're involved in discipline, and they're involved in, we've had a memorandum of understanding in place with the school division for years that clearly spells out that that's not the officer's role. If little Johnny is misbehaving in class, right, unless he's physically assaulting someone, right, that's not the officer's role. That's the administrator, the teacher's role to deal with it, just like it has been for centuries, right, in schools. So, they're not there to be a disciplinarian. They're not there to take the role of an administrator. They're there to be just that, a resource for all those folks to help them in any way they can. And I think it's critical that we keep them in schools.
Yeah, very. To me, very important. Because just with everything going on with the climate, I think this is the wrong time if you're going to try to do something like that. So what would you say as a message to the community for those who Because I believe it all starts with the individual, and it may not be being a policeman, it may not be doing videos, and it may not be going out in your community and protesting, but what is your message to the individual so they can get started doing something to help bring change?
Yeah, I think we've got to, check our own realities, right? We got to realize that my experience is not your experience or someone else's experience. We've got to be willing to listen, right? I mean, if we aren't willing to listen, then we're never going to get anywhere. And when we're listening, we need to listen to understand, not listen to respond, right? And I think all too often in our country in today's day and age, we are immediately faced with topic X, whatever that is, and immediately people want to know what side are you on? Mm-hmm. What corner are you going to go to, right? And if our immediate reaction is to step back in the corner and just, okay, here's where I'm at, I'm going to put my fists up and I'm going to defend everything I believe in, and I don't want to hear anything that you have to say, I went to a school many years ago that had a gentleman by the name of Mike Dugan that he's I believe now a state senator in Georgia, and he said a statement to me that just resonates with me and I always use, and that's if we start with our differences and try to get to the middle, we're never going to make progress. But if we start with what we have in common and work backwards from there, we're going to make some progress, yep. Right? Like you and I have talked a little bit, right? Yep. Like you've got a son, I've got a son. We got that in common, right? Yep. And we can probably share all sorts of stories about teenage boys, right? Yeah. And all the stuff that goes along with that, yep. Right? So if we can start in the middle somewhere on where we have commonalities or common ground and work back towards the differences, that's how we're going to have success. If we just immediately jump to our corners and try and defend our positions, and that's not going to be successful. So I think that's my biggest message is, we've got to treat each other like human beings, treat each other like we would like to be treated ourselves, and start to have those difficult discussions. We got to. I got to challenge what you believe in. You got to challenge what I believe in respectfully, yeah. Right? And that's how we're going to understand each other and make some progress going forward, I think.
Yep. Well, I appreciate having you on.
No, thank you for having me.
If you just want to give them like the days and times of those listening sessions, or
yeah, so all that information is on our social media, but the next one is next Wednesday night. So that would be August, I believe. Sorry, August. I'm getting ahead of myself. July the 22nd. It's at 6 p.m. and it's at College Hill Recreation Center on Jackson Street, 800 block here in Lynchburg. And if you want to go to our social media, that's got the remainder of the last two after that. But we encourage folks to come out, be a part of the solution. And let us know how your interactions have been with Lynchburg Police.
All right, I appreciate it. Right. Thank you for coming on. And as I always say, one love, be blessed. We would like to thank you for listening to this episode of The Art of Reinvention by Teflon John. And we encourage you to share this episode across all your social media platforms. And we also encourage you to visit our website at www.imteflonjohn.com and follow us on all our social media platforms at facebook.com/realteflonjohn, twitter.com/realteflonjohn, and instagram.com/realteflonjohn. And while you're on Facebook, go ahead and like our page so you can receive first-hand notifications every time we go live with a motivational video or any motivational content. And as I always say, one love, be blessed.